Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Spilling Tea. I am your host, Tiffany Daniels, and we are going once again to that horror show we all know as the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center Incorporated. We're going over some coverage from an interesting place today called the Center for Public Integrity. This could be interesting. This will also be my first time taking a look at this as well. But before we get started, a few quick disclaimers. First of all, you will find the link to this article right in the description, as well as other pertinent links to the Stop the Shocks campaign, as well as the Shut the Judge Rotenberg Center Down petition. So, folks, if you haven't already signed it, please do and continue to share on all your platforms. Also, when we are discussing the Judge Rotenberg Education Center, you will hear vivid descriptions of, as well as occasionally see actual video surveillance footage of people with disabilities being abused and tortured. So, folks, if you have young ones about, please do wear your headphones. This was published July 30th, 2021, so just a few days ago. It says, the UN says it's torture. Judges ruled this school can use shock therapy anyway. I like 'em already. Electric shocks are a rare form of school discipline meted out to students with disabilities. Restraint is far more common. Both draw objections. This is from Corey Mitchell. Dude, right here. The Judge Rotenberg Educational Center, a private Massachusetts residential and day school, has for decades used shock therapy on students with developmental and emotional disabilities to curb aggressive behavior and self-harm. This is the line that they tote, anyways. I'm still interested to see if a publication will actually have the balls to admit that investigative studies have been done. And far from curb aggressive behavior and self-harm, they will shock them for anything. But anyways, this month the school won a reprieve from a proposed ban after federal appeals court concluded that the March 2020 decision by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration was beyond the agency's authority because it interfered with the practice of medicine. That's still beyond bizarre. Then what authority do they have to regulate drug prescriptions? Just saying. Staff at the center used a graduated electronic defibrillator, commonly referred to as GED, to remotely shock students and older clients through electrodes attached to the skin. The facility is the only one known to use the device invented by the center's founder. Thank you! Oh my god, somebody actually says it. This is not what these people use who are smokers wanting to stop smoking, okay? They're not using GED devices. Jesus Christ, thank you. All those currently approved for the device are 25 or older, though it has been used on teenagers in the past. It's been used on those who are even younger than teenagers. Remember, they started Torres out at 8 years old. There have been some descriptions of kids being 5 years old. And considering what they just passed in the DC Circuit Court, I wouldn't be surprised if it's on teenagers while we speak. Prior to last year's ban, legal and legislative efforts to stop use of the device had fallen short despite incidents that drew international condemnation, including from the United Nations torture investigator, who found that the device violated the UN Convention Against Torture. Thank you. In an incident that led to a state investigation and the resignation of the center's founder, A former resident posing as a supervisor convinced staff to administer dozens of shocks to two teenagers for alleged misbehavior. That's kind of misleading. I'll give them. Uh, I have to say it. It wasn't dozens of shocks. It was 77 shocks each, okay? Just saying. For alleged misbehavior, families have also followed suit against the center, including one case in which the staff repeatedly shocked a teenager after he allegedly refused to remove his jacket. Allegedly, my ass, we have surveillance footage. There is surveillance footage of the entire incident. 7 hours of horror, which all started because he refused to move his jacket. It's not alleged anything. Oh my God, I thought you had a brain. Moving on. The GED is a treatment of last resort and its recipients at risk of grievous bodily harm or even death without it. Because it's life threatening for you not to remove your coat. It's life threatening for you to blink rapidly. You might kill yourself for getting up and giving someone a hug. Yeah, I'm not even going to read their statement. It's so much bullshit. Families often turn to the school after being kicked out of or denied entry into other facilities. They never say what those treatments are in those other facilities, by the way, in any single media thing I've seen in 13 plus years. They always talk about how these kids are kicked out of all their schools and that it's desperate and that the JRC comes to save them. No, you never talk about what actually happens at those facilities. If you remember when we were going over Andre's case, he had actually been sexually assaulted at one of those homes. Just saying. Michelle and Charles Winter's severely autistic daughter enrolled at the center in 2010 as a teenager after a facility in New York banned her. She's one of dozens of residents at the Judge Rotenberg Center who received 2-second shocks from the GED. I had hopes for you. I really had hopes for you. You all started so well, and then you just bought it. You bought it! Because the parents said that they can't be handled and they're getting kicked out of these schools. But what are they doing in these schools? That's the question nobody seems to ask. But anyways, moving on. Judge Rotenberg's staff required her to wear a padded helmet with a face mask on to prevent her from banging her head on hard surfaces and biting her hands, behavior that left her bloodied and bruised. But did the Judge Rotenberg Center staff do anything at all to uncover what caused the self-injurious behavior? No, because these facilities don't benefit off of people who are well. They want to keep the person in their issues so they can continue to benefit $285,000 a year per head. Just saying. Now, more than a decade later, the 27-year-old is among dozens of clients who are shocked to modify their behavior. Because that's okay. It's okay. As long as they're disabled and they have caused self-injury to themselves at some point in time, it's okay to shock and abuse and punish them for their behavior. 27-year-old full-ass grown adults. But we won't do the same thing to people who are war criminals. Do you all even think? Do you even care to think? Staff began administering the electric shocks to her 2 years ago after sustained attempts at other methods to stop self-harm failed. Again, let's go over what those are. Sleep deprivation, food deprivation, pinches, squirts of water, hitting. We've gone over this before. This comes from other court cases far older than Andre McCollins. Okay? The batteries were connected to the electrodes are stored in a fanny pack she wears on her waist. On the face of it, it seems cruel and humane, but you have to look at what the options are for people who have these violent, self-injurious, or aggressive behaviors, Charles Winters said. Oh, I'm going to unpack this. I know I've unpacked it many times, but for the idiots, I have to unpack it again. Okay. There are other options besides drugging your kids to the gills to the point of no autonomy at all, or shocking them to death. There's reasons why lobotomies have been banned, okay? There are other treatments out there. There is. Okay? There are common fucking sense treatments out there that work on folks just like your daughter. So why is it okay if your daughter was doing self-harm so much to cause her further harm by shocking the hell out of her? Just how does this... So we're going to stop self-abuse and replace it with more abuse. How does this make logical moving on. Restraints include physical holds or devices such as handcuffs or restraint chairs that limit ability of students to move freely. The federal government defines seclusion as instance where students are confined alone in a room and an area to prevent it from leaving. Schools often call them timeout rooms. Oh, the isolation cells. We actually have gone over this on our channel. So the JRC is just the tip of the iceberg, folks. What these normal people consider horrible behavior, we're talking kids being shocked, locked away in isolation rooms, or strapped to a chair for stimming. They, at the JRC, would have shocked me for doing this. Put me on a 4-point board if I refused to stop because I was self-regulating. Just saying. I don't care how extreme the situation is. And I know about those extreme situations. I've been a part of those extreme situations. I have assisted during those extreme situations. This is not the fucking answer. Okay? Further traumatizing your kids after they've already traumatized themselves is not the damn answer. Then you come at me, well, what is the answer? Take your head out of your ass. Realize that behavior is communication and find out what's behind the behaviors. It's common sense. Apparently, in medicine these days, common sense is not all that common. Moving on. A 2009 report for the Government Accountability Office found hundreds of cases of alleged abuse and death tied to restraint and seclusion in public schools or private facilities during the prior 2 decades. In several cases, the teachers and administrators involved in the incidents continue to work with students, sometimes in the same school or district. How does that justify the JRC? They strapped these kids into a chair. They didn't just use restraint. They would restrain them and then abuse them further with the shocks. Really? Really? Oh, we're going to have more stupid. Fabulous. The U.S. government does not track how many students are injured or killed in restraints. That absence of data is a problem for researchers. Nobody's really inviting us to look at their ugly side, said Joseph Ryan, a professor of special education at Clemson University who studies the use of restraints in schools and private youth facilities. In Fort Worth, Texas, a 21-year-old autistic student died in March after staff restrained him at a school for students with disabilities. The incident remains under investigation. In May 2020, a teenage resident at Lakeside Academy, a Michigan residential facility for juvenile offenders and children in the foster care system, died after being tackled and restrained by 7 staff members for throwing food in the cafeteria. The facility has since closed. There are no federal laws restricting the use of restraints, and state laws vary widely. But a 2012 U.S. Department of Education report advised that restraint or seclusion should never be used except in situations where a child's behavior poses imminent danger of serious physical harm to self or others. Schools, however, often you look at this as open to interpretation, like the Judge Rotenberg Center. They consider behaviors such as muscle tense-ups in response to being electrocuted as aggressive trigger behavior and a reason to continue to keep them restrained and continue to do it. But moving on. Before his time at Clemson, Ryan taught students with emotional and behavioral disorders in public schools, day schools, and a residential treatment center. He now helps public schools and private facilities understand and correct their overuse of restraint and seclusion. When he interviews staff and asks questions about proper procedures, they typically come back with a textbook response. Ryan said, "Then I look at the incident reports when the kids were actually restrained," he said, "and few involved students being physically aggressive." Thank you. Instead, restraints are often used in situations where the students refuse to follow directions, which is at the JRC. This is what's going on in these places. This is what's happening. Because we've refused to comply or follow a direction, but we are harming no one and not ourselves. We end up dead. We end up tortured. We end up abused. And nobody gives a damn. Just saying. The use of seclusion and restraint often becomes culture within the school, he said. All right. So I thought they were going stupid, but towards the end, they really did begin to redeem themselves. So I'm sorry if I started judging this a little harshly there in the middle. It's definitely nice to see an article like this that doesn't just cover what's happening at the JRC, but what's going on in the public and some of these special education schools. This was a well-rounded article. I wasn't really expecting that. So I will definitely be proud to go ahead and post this on my description. That kind of really says it all, folks. JRC is just one of the most notorious offenders. They are by far not alone. And there are people like me who are dying due to this exact sort of thing every day. All right, I'm going to close out on that note. I hope you think about it. Now, we don't always get that many views on this channel, and the few that we do get, especially on the subjects like this, do tend to get removed from time to time. So please, folks, don't forget to hit that like button. Hit subscribe. Don't forget to hit the comments. I do appreciate your time this afternoon, and as always, we here at Spilling Tea hope you have a good one. Bye-bye.